The Gemara tells us in Psachim on Dav Zayin, and the Rambam in Hilchos Brachos, Perek Yud Aleph, talks about making brachas over Lasiyoson, making brachas before the performance of a mitzvah. And that's what we do usually. First we make a bracha, and then we do the mitzvah. And obviously one of the clear exceptions the Gemara gives in Psachim is a ger, a would-be convert, someone who's converting to Judaism. One of the part of the process is tevila, immersing in the mikvah. So clearly you can't make the bracha before the mikvah because you're not Jewish yet. The mikvah is the Iker Hageris, or certainly the Gemara Hageris, and therefore you're not a Jew yet until you do the conversion, until you do the immersion, the tefillah in the mikvah, and hence one cannot make a bracha until after the tova of a mikvah. So that's the general rule. We make the brachas over Lasiyasan. Ger is the clear exception, and there are other discussions of al netilas yadayim, because your hands are dirty before, and other cases as well. So generally speaking, we make a bracha before we do a mitzvah, and etc. What about the question of a bracha on a minhag? So that itself is a question. It's actually a sugya in sukkah on regarding chavitzas harava, banging the haravas, whether one makes a bracha or not on chavitzas harava. So one of the issues in the Gemara is if you assume it's a mitzvah, so then we could discuss a bracha. If it's a minhag, so then if it's just a minhag nevi'im, so perhaps no bracha. So that's a discussion in general. Would a minhag require a bracha? Because the question is, how can we make a bracha on a rabbinical mitzvah? How can we say Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu? God, you commanded me to do it. No, I didn't. The rabbis commanded you to do it. So how could I say a bracha on Ner Chanukah? Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu. So the Gemara asked that question in Shabbos, in the second perek, Chav Beis, Chav Gimel, and the Gemara answers based on the pasuk of Lo Sasur, but the pasuk of Lo Sasur in Parashat Shoftim, that don't turn away from the rabbis when they tell you left is right or right is left. So therefore you have to listen to them. So you have to listen to the rabbis because the Torah tells you to. So really, you can't say v'tzivano. So how far do we take it? What about a minhag? So that's the machokas among the Rishonim, Achronim, whether Lo Sasur extends to a minhag. So I believe the Rambam Shita is Lo Sasur extends even to a minhag. And therefore, in theory, one can still make a bracha on a minhag. So it seems to be, at least in certain minhagim, a chiluk between Ashkenaz and Sfard. In other words, there's certain minhagim that everyone agrees to make a bracha. There's certain minhagim that everyone agrees not to. The machokas Rishonim and the machokas Sfarim and Ashkenaz is on certain mitzvahs, which ones do, which ones don't. So in terms of agreement, at least with halacha today, is the machokas in the Gemara, but chavitas harava, everyone agrees with halacha, you don't make a bracha on Hoshana Rabbah when you bang the Hoshanas. And the Gemara tells us, we know on Yontif Sheni we make brachas all the time. Assuming Yontif Sheni, it's a minhag avosayim b'yadechem, we make brachas all the time. So certain minhagim, and you make brachas on certain you don't. In fact, that's the machokas Rishonim there. Rashi tells us in Sukkah, is this the rule, the exception to the rule? And there's some Rishonim say, we see from this Gemara that you don't make a bracha on a minhag, and others say no. It is a right, you do make a bracha on a minhag. The only reason you don't make a bracha on tilta arava is because it's just tilta bialma. So that's a Machokas Rishonim, whether this Gemara proves the rule or disproves the rule. And those are the different minhagim. So where it comes up, usually a clear distinction between the Sephardim and Ashkenaz is when we say Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. Or I should say when we say Chatzi Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. When we say a half a Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. That is clearly a minhag, a custom. There was no obligation. In fact, that's why one of the rabbis came and they were wondering, what are they saying Hallel for? And then when they skipped Hallel, they skipped part of Hallel. He realized it's only a custom. So the minhag Ashkenaz is to make a bracha even on Chatzi Hallel, and the minhag Sfard is not to. So there's the famous Brisker Rav, based on Tosis and Brachas and other places, that what's the distinction? Why do we make a bracha on Chatzi Hallel, which is a minhag, but not a bracha on Tilto Arava? Because, as some explain, it's because Tilto Arava is a pure minhag b'alma. It's always in the form of a minhag. But Hallel, even on Rosh Chodesh, it's not. But Hallel on Yontiv is a mitzvah midrabanan, and perhaps a mitzvah min Torah. So therefore, since Hallel is kind of like a chefza shel mitzvah, so therefore it's a higher level minhag, and therefore we do make a bracha. So the minhag Ashkenaz is we make a bracha on Chatzi Hallel Rosh Chodesh, and the Mechaber and the Sephardim don't. They say we don't make a bracha. It's a minhag. Chatzi Hallel on Rosh Chodesh is a minhag we do not make a bracha on. So, and we learned that the rule from a Rabbi. So the question is, it seems to be an apparent contradiction in the Mechaber. The Mechaber writes, when it comes to Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, we don't make a bracha because we're saying Hallel on Rosh Chodesh is only a mitzvah. However, in Shulchan Aruch they bring down regarding Ner Chanukah beveis haKnesses shemadlikin umevarchem mishum pirsumei nisa, that one makes a bracha when they light Shabbos candles in the Beis HaKnesses. And we all know that lighting in the Beis HaKnesses is not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is Ner Ishu Beiso. To fulfill your mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, it has to be in your bayit, it has to be in your home. And if you're a guest in someone's home, either you give money for the candles or oil, or you make your own. But either way, it's an issue. You have to work out an issue because you have to light in your home. Of course, if that's the whole discussion, a train, a plane, like if you're buying that area, so maybe it is your home that night, or you're in a hotel, you're paying for it. But whatever the definition of your home is, you need your home. You need Ner Ishu Beiso. So that's an obligation, chovas, on you and you to do in your house. So everyone agrees, if you light in the Beis HaKnesses and not at home, you have not fulfilled your mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. You might have fulfilled the minhag of lighting neiros in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Beis HaKnesses, but you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. And everyone agrees if you lit in your house and not in shul, you still fulfilled your mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, you just didn't fulfill the minhag of lighting Shabbos candles in shul. In fact, today it's accepted custom, but not everyone accepted this tradition as well of even having candles in shul. However, today the accepted practice is that one does light in shul, and it's clearly just a minhag. So there's a famous kasha of the Chacham Tzvi, who points out there's an apparent contradiction in the Mechaber. And I'll quote that, or I won't quote, so I'll just summarize. So his question is that we see the Mechaber Paskin when it comes to Halal on Rosh Chodesh, which is a minig, you don't make a bracha. Yet, when it came to the minig of lighting Chanukah candles in shul, there were Mechaber Paskin, you do make a bracha. Either both minhagim. So what's the difference? According to the minig Ashkenaz, who make a bracha on Halal Rosh Chodesh, so it makes sense as well to make a bracha on Neiros in the Beis HaKnesses. We make brachas on minhagim, and in fact it seems similar to Halal, because Neiros Chanukah also is a Chefza Shel Mitzvah. We light Chanukah candles at home, and we expanded the Chiyuv, we do it in shul. But it's not like it's just it's opposed to a Rava. But according to the Mechaber, what's the distinction between the minig of Halal and Rosh Chodesh, saying half a Halal, versus the minig of lighting candles Beis HaKnesses? That's the famous question of the Chacham Tzvi. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden in the Mor Ketzia, who happens to be the son of the Chacham Tzvi, and others, suggest different answers. So one answer is that if you look at the Lashon, he says Malikim Mavarchim Mishum Persumi Nisa. That over here there's a different element besides just the lighting the candles. Part of the institution is because of the publicizing the miracle. In fact, that's the famous Chuvas Arivash, who writes, he wants to suggest historically when exactly did the minig of lighting in shul begin. Or it's not mentioned at all in the Gemara, so clearly it didn't happen then, else the Gemara would have spoke about it. And others write it's minig vasikin, there's a discussion how early it goes back. But the Rivash has an interesting reason. He says because the reason for we used to light Hanukkah candles outside across from the mezuzah, and now we light them inside. So he points out that you get more Persumei Nisa outside than inside. There are more people, and therefore once they moved the takana inside, so in order to enhance the Persumei Nisa aspect, they added a minhag, an additional light of lighting in the Beis HaKnesses. The assumption being the more people in shul than there are in your home. So it was only a later institution. So the whole reason was for Persumei Nisa, and therefore, like the Vilna Gaon writes, in fact, why do we light in shul at all? It's not a bias. The Beis Yosef writes, maybe for some it was, for the Aniyim, the people who lived there, or perhaps the Eino Baki who also was an Ani, who couldn't make their own bracha, but then it was their bayit. It was considered, but according to us, who no one lives there, so why do we light there, and why do we light there with a bracha? So we see part of the, as the Vilna Gaon writes, because this like on Hallel, we say Hallel at the Seder Leil Pesach. What about Leil Pesach in Shul? So that's based on the Yerushalmi. It seems to be a machlokas Machaber Ramah Sfarim and Ashkenaz. The straight psak is Sfarim say it, Ashkenaz don't. However, many Ashkenaz shuls, many young Israel say it because of Soloveitchik, the Briskers felt you should say it, and therefore he said if it's not going to cause a big machlokas, the Rav told his students that they should institute it in their shul. So many of the Ashkenazic shuls have taken it on. But strictly speaking, the psak of Bnei Ashkenaz is not to say Hallel. So it's a discussion about Hallel or Pesach. So the Vilna Gaon says, what is the basis for saying Hallel in shul? He was like the Brisker Rav, he says you should say it, is because anytime Chazal instituted a mitzvah of Persumei Nisa b'yachid, they wanted to institute it for Rabbim. So it was a form, So when they put Beis HaKnesses, and they put the candles in the Beis HaKnesses, it was to do Pirsim Barabim, and to elaborate on the mitzvah. So therefore, it's more than just a mitzvah, it's part of pursuing Nisa. And therefore, that's why the language of the Machaba, Madlikim Umavarchim. Okay, so it's just a minute, so what do you mean a bracha for? So people through Yaakov Abden writes, because if you're just learning menorah in shul, there are a lot of menorahs in shul, although other ones are only have 6 or 7 versus 8 and 9, but people aren't going to be paying attention. They'll just notice, oh, another lighting in a menorah. Okay, so in other words, have nothing to do with Hanukkah. So we davka have to light the Neiros Hanukkah with a bracha in order to show that we're doing it mishum pursuing needs. In fact, Rav Yaakov Emden says the Chiddush in general, maybe perhaps near Hanukkah is different than other mitzvahs, that the brachas are li'kuvak, because if the whole purpose is pursuing nisa, you don't make a bracha, it's not apparent. So in fact, that's why, and even though the reason according to some might not apply anymore, let's say we don't have people living in shul, but as the Rambam writes regarding Chazaras Hashat, even though today in the shuls we have Bikim, nevertheless the minig continued, or some as well have a practice Kiddush Leil Shabbos in shul, even though there are no. So in general, there's a question, once you have a minig, even if the reason doesn't apply, even though we don't have any aniyim living in shul, but apparently the takana still exists, and here from different reasons of pursuing nisa, it's part of the mitzvah publicizing the miracle, and that's why you make a bracha. And we know how important the bracha is, as Rav Soloveitchik used to always say over, we don't have to look past Shmini Atzeres eating in the sukkah. The Shulchan Aruch passage, you eat in the sukkah without a bracha. So people say once there's no bracha, they don't have to eat in the sukkah at all anymore, because Dali doesn't count. And we see it causes zilzul to the mitzvah. So one of the reasons to make the bracha, you want to make sure people do it. In fact, it's interesting that even based on the Rivash, that if the whole reason for, there's a whole discussion bisman hazeh, can you light outside? Can you light outside? Should you light outside? There's different customs, even though we're not in Shas Sakana anymore. But most still light inside, but those who light outside. So assuming you can light outside, perhaps lighting outside is better, whatever the shittas are. So some suggest that if you're going to be lighting outside, or if the community is lighting outside, then perhaps maybe there's no reason to light candles in the shul. In fact, Rosh Sternbruch didn't take it that far, but that was the same logic. They asked him what they wanted a machabed him in shul to light the candles in shul, and he didn't want to do it. And someone asked me, because since I light outside, I think he lives in Har Nof, and everyone lights outside, so therefore it's not so simple that that the minhag still exists for me, and therefore he declined. So he didn't go that far to say that people should stop doing it, but it makes based on the logical extreme, it makes sense that if you go like the Rivash, that the whole reason for the minhag was because we're lighting inside now. So once people start lighting outside, so l'chayra you wouldn't need the minhag anymore. Do you say that once you have the minhag vasikin, I will not change it? So either way, we asked, this seems to be an apparent contradiction in the Rambam and the Machaber. Machaber writes, you don't say a bracha on Chatzi Halo Rosh Hashanah because it's a minhag, yet everyone agrees it's a minhag to light candles in the Beis HaKnesses on Hanukkah. You do make a bracha, so, and that's the Chacham Tzvi's Kasha, and Rav Yaakov Emden others answer, because here it's not just the minhag of lighting candles, but it's an element of pursuing nisa. As the Vilna Gaon says, anytime we do it inside, every time we do it b'yachids, we want to do it b'tzibur. And it's a Rav Yaakov Emden explains, especially in this case, the importance of the brachas. Normally the brachas are always important, but they're usually not ma'akev in the mitzvah. But here the Machaber is focusing ma'alikin u'mavarchim, not necessarily in that order, but you light candles if you make a bracha because of Persumei Nisa, because if you didn't make a bracha, people would not know you're lighting L'Shem Chanukah. They might just think it's lighting another menorah in the shul, and hence the minute continues, Bisman Hazeh, that one continues lighting in the shul without a bracha. I mean, it continues lighting in the shul with a bracha, even though it's only a minute, even according to the Mechaber. So the parasha begins, Vayigash Elav Yehuda, that begins with the confrontation between Yehuda and Yosef. And Yehuda realized that since Binyamin was involved now, it was no longer a sin for the selling of Yosef, so therefore he got more aggressive. Vayigash Elav Yehuda, and he spoke to Yosef. And that led it started off as a confrontation and ended off where Yehuda and Yosef made up, and Yosef revealed himself to the brothers. And he Yosef ha'od avichai. So we see it's the beginning of the parsha that up until now we were talking about Mechiras Yosef and all the terrible things that were happening. Now it's the beginning of the reconciliation between Yehuda and Yosef and all the brothers. And it's Vayigash Elav Yehuda, and we find then the brothers, when he picked on Binyamin to go ahead and to get the goblets, he left it in to see if the brothers really cared about Rachel's children. And we find many incidents in the parsha that shows the Achdus Yisrael. And in fact, that's what the Abarbanel pointed out, that they wanted to make sure that Binyamin, who was a Bnei Rachel, they still didn't have a distaste for, and they went ahead and they stood up for it. And that's what the Haftorah talks about. We had the separation of Malchus Yehuda, Malchus Yisrael, and then in the end of the day, it's going to be one branch. It's going to all come together, and that's through Avas Yisrael. So the parasha of Vayigash is the parasha of Avas Yisrael, as the Yerushalmi points out. Just like if you're cutting a piece of meat and you accidentally cut off a finger, you're not going to take the other hand's not going to go up and cut off the other hand's finger, because you're all one unit. And that's how we have to view everything. As the Rafinda points out, Avas Yisrael, it's loving someone because he's a Yid. In other words, he says that if you didn't even know the person was Jewish and you liked him, I mean, there's a mitzvah to be nice with everyone and have friends, but you wouldn't be in fulfillment of the mitzvah of Avas Yisrael, because you didn't know he was loving a Jew because he's a Jew. That's what we see by Yigash, is Avas Yisrael, and we'll see that maybe that's what Asara B'Tevis as well is all about. So to get the connection between Asara B'Tevis and Avas Yisrael, we just have to go over a famous Avidraham. The Avidraham, quoted in the Beis Yosef, points out that Asara B'Tevis hu meshuna mishar tanios. Asara B'Tevis is different than all the other tanios, all the other fasts. Im hayachol b'Shabbos, that if it fell out on Shabbos, lo hayu yicholin udchoso yom acher. You can't push it off to another day. Ve'shenemar bo be'etzem hayom hazeh kamo b'yom HaKippurim. U'mesayim Beis Yosef lo yadati minayin lo zeh. And the Beis Yosef says, I don't know where the Beis Yosef says, I don't know where the Avidram got it from. Why is it that Asara B'Tevis falls out on Shabbos, we fast, but yet other fast days in Tisha B'Av, which is more strict than Asara B'Tevis, we don't fast. On Shabbos, we push it off to Sunday. So we quote some beautiful pshat in the Chasim Sofer, in the Siddur of the Chasim Sofer, and in his Perusha with Slichos Asara B'Tevis, he writes as follows. And, where does he get this? But maybe based on Midrashim. Ki b'shana shenekrav habayis b'tes ba'av on the year that the temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av, Kfar Nigmar Hadin, but Asara B'Tevos over now. In the year that the temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av, it was set in stone already, or it was paskin, not to count the change, but it was paskin on Asara B'Tevos of the year before. V'chein v'chol shana v'shana nigzar adin b'asara b'Tevos im yeh avelos tisha b'av b'shana zu. So every Asara B'Tevos, in other words, according to the Chasim Sofer, this coming Saturday night, Sunday, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to determine, well, in this case, not if the Beis HaMikdash will be destroyed, but if it's going to be rebuilt. The Yaduadah called Sarah Sha'avra Kamo Yom Shemeis Bo Aviv Imom, and like any other tzara of a yortzeit, Ein Mis'anim B'Shabbos. So anything that's over the past, Tisha B'Av, a yortzeit, there is no fasting on Shabbos. About Tainis Chalom Mutter L'Sana is why B'Shvil Oneg Sheyesh Bo Shemavatel Sarah Hasida Lavo Lo Mu'unahu. But Tainis Chalom is you have a bad dream, you shook it up, you worry about something that's going to happen, so then you can fast on Shabbos. He'll call Tainis Tesbab Docha Rakal Sarah Sha'arva. About Tainis Jud B'Tev Zewa Bitul Sarah Hasida. It's going on the future for Onegu. Alkain Haya Docha Shabbos. Therefore it supersedes the Shabbos. V'hainu Shemachevin Asara B'Tevas Donim Lamala Im Yibana Beis HaMikdash P'shana Zu Hareza Tainas Al Sarah Hasida Lava was a Mutu Atzano. So the Chasim Sofer has a beautiful yisod that any time we're fasting based on something that already happened in the past, that doesn't warrant fasting on Shabbos, and we have a mitzvah to eat. But if it's something which involves the future, if you can avoid a future sarah, so that even on Shabbos when it's permitted, Tainis Chalom, when it's permitted to fast, and that's why Asara B'Tevis, that's the Pshat in Ha'avid Drum. That since Asara B'Tevis, it's determined whether this coming Tisha B'Av, the Beis HaMikdash should be rebuilt or continue to be destroyed. That depends on us, and therefore it's going on the Asida. And then then in the Sefer Imrei Baruch, where Baruch Simon brings down as well, that we know on the other fast days we found, historically speaking, something happened. So for instance, it's brought down from Rav Shlomo Fisher in the Sefer Drushas Ben Yishai, Sharoam, he says, B'chol Tanios Kamo Yud Zayin Tamaz V'tes Ba'av Shahaya Ma'ura B'yom Zeh B'avor Shahayado Hushwish Prunis B'yom Zeh. In other words, different things happen. So Yud Zayin Tamaz Hu Yom Chet Ego. Yud Zayin Tamaz is a day where the sin of the golden calf. Tes B'av Hu Yom Chet Amaraglim. Tisha B'Av is a sin of the Meraglim. What happened on Asara B'Teves? So that's what Rav Fisher suggests, a potential speculation. He wants to claim perhaps that Mechiras Yosef happened on that day. Why? He named Mechiras Yosef will perish Be'ezah Yom Hay. We don't know what day it happened. And he said perhaps it happened on Asara B'Teves. Even though there's no proof, but what's the hint to it? Chichodesh Teves Mazel Gedit, from the Mazel of Gedi. The Gedi Metame Misamo Eschei Mechiras Yosef. The Gedi represents the sin of Mechiras Yosef. Why? Because the pasuk says, "Vayishchatus Yarizim." K'mo She'enos Agamara, it's the Avan Gedi that caused it. So we see a relationship dipping into goat's blood and with the garment. So Rav Fisher wanted to suggest that perhaps Asara B'Teves, something did happen on that day, that it was the day was Mechiras Yosef. If that's true, that the sin of Mechiras Yosef happened on Asara B'Teves, and what was the cause of Mechiras Yosef? It was Sinas Chinam, the sin of the brothers, the hatred they had to Yosef based on whatever the reasons were, justified and not justified, and therefore, and we still don't have a Beis HaMikdash today. So therefore, as we know, the Beis HaMikdash, the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of the big three. The second, idol worship, Avodah Zarah, Shvichas Damim, murder. So Avodah Zarah and Gil Arai is a list of relation to big three. So, and the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of Sinas Chinam, and obviously we see the second Beis HaMikdash was started to be rebuilt 70 years later. We're still waiting for the Churban Bayis Sheni. And as Rav Kook always used to say, if Sinas Chinam was the cause, was the root cause of the destruction, so to bring it back we need Avas Chinam. And that's what the connection, that's what Sorah B'Tevis is all about, to reconcile the sin of Mechiras Yosef to Abbas Yitro, and that's why it's Parshas Vayigash. Vayigash I love Yehuda. When the brothers got together, Yosef and Yehuda, Yosef and Binyamin and the brothers, and that's what we have to strive for, because on Sorah B'Tevis, God determines if He wants to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, and He'll only decide to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash if He sees Avas Yisrael. So on Friday night, we have what we say, and usually the Chazan, usually Yaakov, not always, says the Tefillah, Bracha Me'ein Shiva. We make the Bracha Me'ein Sheva. Who knows what the Bracha Me'ein Sheva is, Friday night?
Yeah, so the summary of the Shmona Esrei.
Right, so at the end of Shmona Esrei, we say the Magan Avos, and we do the other Baruch Atah Hashem. It's called the Bracha Me'ein Sheva. And so what is that all about? How come we only do it Friday night? What happened to tonight? What happens to Saturday night? What is that based on? To the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Yomi passed there by now, Daf Chav Daled. The Gemara talks about why do they institute the Tefillah a Bracha Me'ein Sheva. So the Gemara seems to say Mishum Sakana. There was a danger. What does the danger mean? So there's a major machlokas, what we'll call Rashi and the Vilna Gaon. It's not just them, but how does Rashi explain the Gemara? Mishum Sakana. Sakana is mazikin. In other words, during those days there were concerns of mazikin, like these spiritual forces, demons, whatever you call them. And and they used to have the shuls on the outskirts of town in the yishuv. So during the week, people were working and they didn't get back from work, and many people didn't go to shul during the week. They were busy, they didn't get out of work late, and therefore they davened at home. But on Friday night, when they weren't work, they had to close up shop early, because they can't work anyway at Shabbos. So they used to go to shul Friday night and Shabbos. So they used to go to shul Friday night, and the shuls were outside on the outskirts of town, where I'd say there was a certain type of danger. So Chazal, the rabbis were worried about people either coming late to shul. We don't worry about people coming late, but assuming that people came late, actually davened the whole thing. So therefore, if they came late and they actually stayed later, and therefore they didn't want them walking home alone, or let's say someone who davens with a little slower, whether it's with less kavanah, more kavanah, but they daven slow. So that you don't want one or two people being stuck at the end and walking back alone. So to the extent the tefillah, the tzibur, to extend the davening, to let those people catch up, the people with the slow Shmona Esrei, or people who came late, not to walk home alone, they extended Bracha Me'ein Sheva. That's the way Rashi learns the Gemara. The Sakana was the reason, but it was in order to concern the people who are going to come back not to walk home alone. The Vilna Gaon seems to have a different understanding of the Gemara. The Vilna Gaon says, not that he disagrees with that part might have been true, but maybe Sakana could have been the cause, but that wasn't really the reason. It was more of a symptom. The reason why it was set up, the Vilna Gaon says, it was set up more as a Chazaras Hashat. We know ordinarily we have Shacharis and Mincha, so the Chazan repeats the Shmona Esrei. It's called Chazaras Hashat. And at Ma'ariv, we don't have Chazaras Hashatz? How come we don't have Ma'ariv? How come we don't have Chazaras Hashatz during the week on an evening service?
Well, because to begin with, it's a Rishus, so it gives it its power somehow.
Right, that's what the Beis Yosef writes. As we're familiar with the Gemara in Brachas, the Machokas in the Gemara, what is the status of Tfilas Aravis?
Right.
We paskin Tfilas Aravis Rishus. Rishus not necessarily mean optional, but let's say lower level obligation. So therefore the Beis Yosef writes, they never instituted a Chazaras Hashatz because at one point in Jewish history it might have been optional. So the Vilna Gaon writes, let's say someone walked in and either they davened the Friday night they're in shul, they daven a weeknight Shmona Esrei. Instead of davening the Shabbos Shmona Esrei, they davened the weekday and they didn't mention Shabbos, or they didn't. Well, let's say they didn't daven at all. For whatever reason, they were in shul and they didn't daven. So the Vilna Gaon says the purpose of the bracha me'ein sheva is like a chazaras hashatz, and therefore he writes that one who missed davening can make it up by listening to. It's like there is a halacha all week long, truth be told. Our meaning is that we daven over again because it's hard for us to have kavanah for that long, but strictly speaking, if you forget Ya'alov V'Yavo, if you forget Tal Matar, Mashav HaRuach, if you listen from Mitchila at Sofa, which is hard to do and hard to hear in some places, is that if you listen to the Shemona Esrei from beginning to end, you could be Yotzei Shemona Esrei. We usually don't rely on that. We usually go ahead and we daven our own. Again, in general, we don't rely on it. The Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, it's for the Eino Baki. But those who don't know how to daven, one of the reasons Chazaras Hashatz was instituted for those who can't daven on their own, don't know how to read Hebrew, so you listen to the Chazan. But, however, in the case where you already daven, but you left out Ya'alov V'Yavo, or Tal Matar, Mashav HaRuach, whatever you left out, so strictly speaking, we paskin, you're allowed to listen to you don't have to repeat the Shemona Esrei yourself. If you could concentrate from beginning to end and hear every word, you could listen to so our meaning is we daven, we do it on our own. But either way,
you're usually talking to somebody.
Yeah, there's too much noise, or your chazan's not loud enough, whatever the case may be. But even if he is, we say because you can't concentrate that long. But the Vilna Gaon says it's the same halacha on bracha me'ein sheva. You could listen to and that's much easier to do. It only takes about a minute. A bracha me'ein sheva, but you only have to make up 7 brachas. You don't have to make up 19. And therefore, he says the reason for the institution of Magin Avos Friday night is that the Chazaras Hashatz, the one who did not daven yet, or did not daven the weekday instead of the Shabbos, you can listen to the Chazaras Hashatz. You can listen to the bracha me'ein sheva, even though it's only a 7 brachas for an Esrei, one could be Yotzei. So one practical difference between the Vilna Gaon and Rashi is according to Rashi, really it's just a buffer. What you're saying isn't important. You could say they could have instituted it. Once they instituted this is what we do. But according to Rashi, Chazal could have instituted a couple Kapitol Tehillim. They could have instituted anything. The point was it was just to stall for time. It's not really important. In other words, the key is that they stall for time, and it's incidental what they did. According to the Vilna Gaon, it's not incidental. It was part of the Takana Chazaras Hashatz, and therefore the nafkamina is who should do the bracha me'ein sheva. So the Vilna Gaon elsewhere seems to be consistent with his view. He says you should listen to the Chazan do it. That's what, in general, the Chazan makes the first bracha. The Kal sings Magin Avos. So in some communities, and the Chazan goes back, that's the Vilna Gaon sheet. So the Chazan has to repeat it so everyone can hear it. Because as opposed to some just go on and the Chazan continues with the last paragraph. The Vilna Gaon says no. The Chazan has to go back and repeat Magin Avos because this is Chazaras Hashatz, and it gets into whether, if everyone's saying it, could you be Yotzi, but the Vilna Gaon L'Shitason, who holds it's part of the mitzvah of Chazaras Hashatz, so it's specifically set up. Each bracha is connected. If you look through the Magin Avos, it's a concise version of the Shemona Esrei. You're saying, Jeff?
Well, according to the Graz explanation, why don't we have that during the week as well?
Yeah, so that's what. As I said, so the Vilna Gaon will have to learn. He'll accept that part of Rashi that they never instituted because it wasn't a problem during the week that people were too busy at work and it's when they had the shuls out in the yishuv and people didn't go. Either people didn't go to in those small communities, they didn't go to shuls at night because it was the time they got there. It was too late to have a 10 o'clock Ma'ariv because there was no lights, all that, and people didn't have an opportunity to go for the mincha. The Vilna Gaon will have to agree because his reason would explain that would according to that you should do it all week long, right? So that's a major machlokas the Vilna Gaon. In fact, with this we can understand another machlokas among the Gaonim. The Gaonim point out the question is, let's say in general the halacha is, let's say you forget to daven. There's a halacha of tashlumin. There's a halacha of makeup. If I forget to daven shacharis, I can make it up at mincha. If I forget mincha, I can make it up at ma'ariv, etc. Ma'ariv to shacharis. So, what happens tar lo hiskia? Let's say you mincha erev Shabbos, you missed it. You came in and they're already up to Kabbalah Shabbos. The time is over, and you didn't daven mincha. So everyone would agree if you miss mincha, you have to daven over. So you'd have to daven 2 Shmoneh Esreis at Ma'ariv. The same thing you do at any other tefillah. Or what happens if you daven mincha, but you left out the same Talomater? We're in the season of the same Talomater, and you daven mincha and you left out, or for matter, you left out Mashav Haruach. You daven mincha, but you left out something that warrants a repeat. The Talomater is a different shaila because there is no Talomater in your Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei because we don't daven the middle section. So let's assume you daven and you left out Mashav Haruach. So some Gaonim point out that what do? You daven your Ma'ariv Shmoneh Esrei, and then when you listen to the bracha Me'ein Sheva, you could be Yotzei your Tfilas Mincha. Even though Mincha was the 19 bracha Shmoneh Esrei, you could listen. It's a discussion how far they go. Some say even if you didn't daven mincha at all. Some say if you daven mincha but left out Mashav Haruach. But the Torah quotes a machlokas among the Gaonim whether you could listen to the bracha Me'ein Sheva to be Yotzei Shmoneh Esrei. So they point out these Gaonim are working with the Vilna Gaon, obviously, because the Vilna Gaon shita is that the bracha Me'ein Sheva is set up as a chazaras hashatz. So he goes so far as to say, some Gaonim, that in lieu of davening, in fact, they point out is, let's say someone walked in late and they missed, that's what according to the, someone walked in late and they missed the regular Friday night Shmoneh Esrei. They walk in right for bracha Me'ein Sheva. According to the Vilna Gaon, you can listen to the Chazin's Chazaras Hashatz and fulfill your mitzvah of Shmoneh Esrei and that bracha Me'ein Sheva. And bracha Me'ein Sheva, and that's why those Gaonim are working with that sheet. That if I have to daven a Shmoneh Esrei, I could be Yotzi my Shmoneh Esrei with the Chazaras Hashatz of the Chazan. That's a major discussion because some point out the Pri Megaddin says it wouldn't work because we all know, what did the Beis Yosef say? Well, how come we normally don't have a Chazaras Hashatz on Ma'ariv? But Friday night, we have a Tfilas Arvis Rishus. So he says the only reason we're lenient for this abridged Shmoneh Esrei, normally Chazaras Hashatz means you repeat the Shmoneh Esrei over. Doesn't mean you have an abridged version. Why does the abridged version work at night? Because since Tfilas Arvis Rishus, so it's lenient anyway, so you could be yoted with this. So the Pri Megaddin discusses, let's say I didn't daven mincha, okay, so I daven Ma'ariv. But now, when I'm doing the tashlumin for when I'm davening the second Shmoneh Esrei, if I'm relying on the Magen Abbas, what tefillah am I making up? I'm making up tefillas mincha, because the tashlumin is normally the second tefillah. So the Pri Megaddin says it can't work here, because the only time you could use the bracha Me'ein Sheva if it's because tefillas arvis is rishus. But if I'm making up a tefillas mincha, which is a chova, so then he claims that it doesn't work. So that's a major discussion we'll have to continue on. But what is the status? Because normally tefillas arvis rishus. So the question, and then the second tefillah is a tashlumin. Could you have a case where the tashlumin is stricter than the original tefillah? That's the same question you ask every night, every time you miss mincha, because tefillah ta'avis is rishus, and the second tefillah is a makeup for mincha. Could you have a status of a tefillah's tashlumin, which is stronger than the first one? And we'll go into some differences.